Common sense reminder from a mom of mixed kids. If you don't know the person who has the mixed kids, it's not okay for you to bring up any kind of conversation about the complexion of their kids. Some of y'all have not studied enough biology, or at least paid attention to basic biology, to really even have that conversation. Here's why it's not okay. This is Pudge Pudge. She's my daughter. I was pregnant with her. She still looks like this. She is blood of my blood and flesh of my flesh. And she looks like this. You know exactly what I'm saying. There is only 2 people that I am not blood related to that can bring up her complexion and it be any sort of funny. And one of those people helped me create her.
You know what's confusing? My existence. Now, hear me out. Now, this is my brother. Makes sense. We're both white, blonde hair, whatever. What's the big deal? Now, this is my mom. It's like, okay, well, she has brown hair, recessive genes. It's still possible. However, this is my dad. So, why am I white? Here's a family photo from 2007, in case you don't believe me. There's little me. And yes, my dad is full black. So can someone please explain to me the Punnett square? Because from my understanding, I should not look like this. Again, why am I white? And not only white at that, why am I blonde too? Because that makes no sense. You know how confusing it is when I have to fill out paperwork and there's no other option for the race or ethnicity part? I can't put that I'm black or African American because they'll think that's some sick joke. But when I put white, I feel like I'm lying.
And my man, thank you to my man. And my man, thank you to my man. And my man.
Okay, hi. So today I wanted to do a DNA test results. I'm not even gonna pretend like I just found out the answers now. I've already seen these, but I'm making the video now. So I've always wanted to do my DNA test and just see what I was, because all my life people always say like, oh, what are you mixed with? What race are you? Where are you from? And I've always known that I'm half black, half white. People, you know, never guess that. People always think I'm something else or I'm mixed with something else. So I just want to see what I actually was, and I was pretty close. I mean, there wasn't that many surprises, I guess you could say. Just the amount, I guess, is surprising. So, okay, so I'll put the results here, or unless they're already there. So, I've always known my mom's side to be Slovak and Polish, which is both Eastern European. So I got 67.1% European in general, and that's 41.4% Eastern European, including Baltic, East Europe, and Balkan. So that wasn't too surprising to me. The amount of European was surprising to me just because I thought it would be almost more 50-50. I mean, my dad is like African American, so most of them are mixed, you know, down the line, but I was kind of surprised to see that it's almost exactly like 2/3 European, 1/3 African, which is kind of weird. It was a lot higher than I thought for European. What did surprise me is 22% North and West Europe, 20% Scandinavian. So that's like pretty high, because I had no idea that I had any Scandinavian in me. And I think that is a good amount my dad, which is interesting. You would never think that by looking at him. And then 3.7% Italian. So it's just interesting. I mean, I know my mom is she's all of the Eastern European, so that Scandinavian just kind of threw things off. It's interesting to me. And African was 32.9%. So like I said, it was almost exactly like 33.67, so like equal 1/3 African. Most of it was West Africa, so Nigerian and Sierra Leone, and then 7.7% East Africa, so Kenyan and Maasai. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting to me. Like I said, I always knew I was just black and white. I thought maybe there would be something else mixed in there, and I guess that's just because people all my life told me, oh, you look like this and that, like all these different places. And it's just interesting to me how it kind of works out. you know, just Europe and African mixed together. People say I don't look like a, you know, they don't guess that I'm white, black and white, but it's just how genetics play out. I mean, it was surprising to me to see that much European. I thought I would be more 50-50. I still always consider myself, you know, biracial. I think it's interesting just how it plays out. As far as genetics, like, I'm a third African and I still got like, you know, pretty dark skin. I still have like, I mean, my hair is like straightened out, but it's curly, and I have like, you know, certain features. And then from my mom, I got her eyes. Hers are blue, mine are green. So yeah, I just think it's interesting how it plays out. It's an interesting mix, I guess. I mean, it's kind of basic, honestly. It's just Europe and African. I mean, nothing crazy, nothing too special. It's just, you know, this is how a 2/3 European, 1/3 African person looks. So that's all, and thank you for watching.
Yes, she's my baby. Yes, I carried her for 38 weeks. Yes, she is a real baby. She's not a fake baby. She's only 6 months old, and I've heard that Cat Williams joke more times than you can count, and it's not funny. For those of you that still have more questions, they can usually be answered by genetics are crazy. They do all kinds of things, and also my husband is white. I think that covers the majority of the questions that I get in real life and on my lives.
Kit Shapiro is the only child of the late, great singer, actress, entertainer Eartha Kitt, who passed away in 2008 at the age of 81. Eartha Kitt, of course, had a legendary career in entertainment spanning over 6 decades. She was the first black woman to play Catwoman in the iconic 60s Batman series and is immortalized in time for her iconic holiday song, Santa Baby, which has been streamed almost 200 million times on Spotify. Eartha Kitt was groundbreaking, to say the least. But even with all of her success in Hollywood, Eartha Kitt considered her greatest achievement being a mom. She and her daughter Kit were incredibly close, and just a few months ago, their relationship took center stage when a TikTok post from Kit went massively viral when she felt compelled to defend her identity. Here's why. The photo you see, take a look, that's Eartha and her biological daughter Kit. But because of the very different skin tones throughout Kit's life, people have questioned whether or not they were really related. Here's some of the highly, I think, insensitive and hurtful comments Kit received after that TikTok post where she mentioned she was Eartha's daughter. Some people said, "I'm confused. Wasn't Eartha Kitt black? Oh my gosh, I'm shocked. You're white. Biological daughter, question mark. I cannot be the only one with this question." In the past, Kit says she has typically chosen not to address these types of comments with a response. But after a lifetime of what she calls pain and scrutiny, this summer, she'd had it. It was finally her time to speak up.
All right, so let's just address the obvious. There are many of you who question whether I am truly my mother's biological child, which is hurtful and insulting, especially since, you know, there's a lot of people out there who don't look the way we think they should look. We have this predetermined idea on how a multiracial human being should appear. I am my mother's biological child. I do look like my mother for people who are willing to see past the blonde hair and the light skin. What can I say? Genetics are a peculiar thing.
Please welcome Kit Shapiro to the Tam Fam. You look beautiful, and you look like your mother. You know, I was perusing social media, and all of a sudden I see Kit Shapiro's going viral. And I think I said, I bet I know what it is. And I clicked on and I saw you in that post there. What I didn't know, in the memoir you wrote, you say, there are people who insist that I have had plastic surgery in order to look more Caucasian and pass white. I mean, These people were digging deep.
It is amazing. I mean, people hide behind, as we all know, we've all been victims of some type of trolling or nastiness online, and people they just assume that because you don't, as I mentioned in the TikTok, look the way they think you should look, then you can't possibly be who you say you are. Now, my mother only had one child, and this is what she got. Sorry, that's all. And she actually loved the fact that I was this mutt, she said. She would say to me, you either break every rule or you fill every quota. Oh. She said, you're a walking United Nations. And I truly think that, she was proud. Yeah. She was proud to be the parent of somebody that couldn't be easily identified because she herself had been so stereotyped and so pigeonholed because of her skin color, obviously. I am, to the other extreme, sometimes, criticized because I'm not black enough, and I can't help the way that I was born.
First, as you said, you're your mother's only child, and her great. I had the pleasure of meeting your mom when I was in local news in Chicago. Everything you saw on TV was the real thing. That's she right. was very authentic to her core. When did you first start to feel like, okay, people? When was the first time you heard somebody say, is that your mom?
Well, you have to realize, when I was born, my mother was already very famous.
Yes.
And people are more impressed by fame than worried about race. So, they were more impressed that, Eartha Kitt had walked in the room than they were thinking, a woman of color had walked in the room. So there was a lot that wasn't said, that was, you were accepted on a different level when your parent is a famous person. Right. So that I didn't really hear of it. My mother often talked about, how she would always talk about the fact that, how beautiful I was. Of course, she was my mother, let's remember that. And I am her only child. And how, how wonderful it is to have, this mixed race, and how mixed race people are so much, more interesting. No offense to everyone who's not, but I think look, there's one thing I think we should all be able to take a DNA test from birth, because we all would realize how much more mixed up we are.
Henry Louis Gates? Yes. Oh boy. When was the first time you remember hurting?
Well, it wasn't really until social media became a thing. So it's after my mother passed. And I had somebody must have been on Facebook, or it was a response to a blog. I have a blog. And it was in response to, you can't possibly be her biological child. She obviously lied to you her entire life, and you were clearly adopted. To which my response was, when do you think a black woman could have adopted a white baby? First of all. I don't care how famous she was.
They weren't exactly doing that back then. Right.
Not in 1961, certainly not. Right. And second of all, my father was as white, pasty, Irish, German Irish as you can get.
So here's my father, this happens.
And I think that what I wanted to say, and what I ended up posting, and this was the first time I actually spoke publicly to it, and I reposted this person, not because I really wanted to people say, oh, don't worry, you are, to pat me on the back, but to really realize that this conversation happens, a lot. Yes. Whether it happens to somebody blatantly or it happens when they walk away behind their back.
Yeah, I've said, listen, my son is of mixed race. He has fair skin. He has curly hair. And he's been on the planet with me 3 years. But of course, I've encountered where people say, oh, is that your da-da-da, And I had braced myself for it when he was born. In full disclosure, the first thing I said was, God, please let his hair be curly. Because I didn't want to deal with it. Do you know if your mom ever was worried about it?
Well, I don't think my mother worried to that extent. I think she understood that she would be...
Look at that.
that she would be questioned, yes, when someone would open the door, she'd be seen with me and someone didn't know who she was. They thought she was the nanny or the housekeeper.
Really? So she encountered that?
Yes. I never experienced that as a little girl. I never realized what was happening, I should say.
But it was happening.
But it was definitely happening.
Coming up almost 14 years since the legendary Eartha Kitt's passing, Kit Shapiro pays tribute to her beloved mom in a beautiful way. You don't want to miss this conversation. back. Today we've been talking with people about how they've overcome labels to live authentically in the world. With us is Kit Shapiro, daughter of the legendary entertainer Eartha Kitt. And those were some exclusive, never-before-seen photos from the family album of Kit and Eartha that Kit wanted to share with the TAM fam. First of all, thank you for that.
Welcome.
What an honor.
We have some incredible photos together. I mean, I was with her so much. We traveled together. She always took me everywhere. Yeah. I mean, I worked for her as I got older. Before that, as a little girl, I traveled with her because my mother felt that travel was the most incredible education, seeing the world and how the world really lived and how other people really truly existed.
You talk about in your memoir that your mom, who was also multiracial, had such tragedy in her past, and what she overcame was remarkable. You said, being both illegitimate and of mixed race, my mother was treated as an outcast by almost everyone around. Beneath all of the fame and success, she was still that cotton picker from the South who'd grown up poor, hungry, abused, and rejected.
Yeah.
But she passed away a legend and lived most of her life
Well,
idolized.
she said that she's taken all of the manure that had been thrown on her and used it as fertilizer.
Wow.
And I think that, I think that she truly was born a survivor.
Yeah.
And she was meant to persevere. And as hard as her childhood was, she took pride in that. And I would say to her sometimes, she would talk about her childhood with a lot of pain and tears, even as, right before she died. But I would say, just let it go, get past it. And she said, why? Why am I ever going to let that go? That's who made me who I am. That is the foundation of what this is.
Talk about things that come at you. You have a story in the book from your childhood. When you were 12 years old, you traveled with your mom to South Africa. And while you were there, she was asked to leave a theme park because it was for white people only. Obviously, apartheid South Africa, the time, but how did she handle that?
So the story, you'll all have to get the book and read the story.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much away.
But the story is so profound because it really was one of the first times that I truly realized that my mother and I looked different. Like, I just assumed, we were mother and daughter. I looked like we would look in the mirror together as mothers and daughters sometimes do, and you would compare, your whatever it was, your features. But this time, this person at the park didn't know who she was, and he didn't realize that she had this diplomatic status when we were in South Africa, and he asked her to leave, and so she just stood up and he took my hand and we went to walk out of the park, and I started saying to her, tell him who you are. Like, he doesn't understand. You need to tell him. I was just really crying. I wanted her to experience. I had been going to the amusement park for the last few days without her. And she said, don't panic. God may not be there when you want him, but he's always on time. And as it turns out, the owner of the amusement park found out that she had been thrown out of the park and was very, very upset and embarrassed that she'd been thrown out of the park. So he said, if there's anything I can do, if you want tickets to the amusement park or whatever I can do for you, Miss Kitt, I'll make it up to you. And so she said, well, we're raising money to build these schools for African children, so a donation would be wonderful. And my daughter would love tickets. We could come back. She'd like to bring some of her friends. So when we went back to the amusement park, my mother brought two children who were what would be referred to as colored children, two black children, and myself. And my mother felt that this image right here in South Africa at that time made a greater statement than if she had made a scene in the moment. Wow. My mother understood that it only takes one person to affect change maybe on one other person.
Yeah.
And that the ripple effect is truly very powerful. It just takes longer.
You talk about your mother's sense of humor. It's been 14 years since she passed away of colon cancer. And you wrote, being able to find laughter in almost every moment was truly a gift, which my mother blessed me with. I have an executive producer, and she always says, so often it's about what we've overcome and the resilience, but we should also make sure our children know our joy. Yes. And you knew what she'd overcome and how resilient, but she wanted you to know she was happy.
Yes.
And that she laughed and that she had
and
joy.
Laughed every day and didn't take herself too seriously. and encouraged me not to take myself too seriously. And she really felt that, every day there's something to smile about.
Yes.
No matter, it might be very, very minuscule, and we are all going through, and some of us more than others go through really tragic and difficult times. But to be able to find one little sliver of hope and one little sliver of happiness and smile, and maybe it's your own smile that helps you, and maybe it will help somebody else. And my mother was really good at giving me that foundation, and I'm truly blessed by it.
I love that.
So now let's do, let's do my parents, 23 and me, and then we'll do mine, because I think that'll explain a little bit better to understand how biology works. For as long as I can remember, both black and white people have questioned whether I am really my parents' child. They look at my parents, then at my sister, and tell me that I must have been adopted, and some even suggested my mom cheated on my dad. I've even had a comparison to a dog. One person said, that if you have a pet, after a while your pet looks like you. That's how crazy it gets with some people. I've experienced this so many times that I could not even tell you every single story. One happened when I was in kindergarten. During attendance, a supply teacher called out my surname, and it's Chinese. When I raised my hand, she apparently decided I could not possibly be Chinese. The school called my mother away from work to confirm. Actually, they said I wasn't in school, that I was missing. So, of course my mom ran from work, even though I was sitting right there in class. That was a supply teacher. I can still remember my mother, the principal, and another teacher standing outside the classroom and looking in at me, and my mom pointing to me. My mother was understandably unhappy that they had called her away from work simply because a teacher taught that my appearance did not match my surname. Another incident that stands out happened at Rouge Valley Hospital in Scarborough, Ontario. I had gone to see a therapist because I wanted to discuss the things my sister and my oldest nephew were doing to me that was causing, major anxiety. Instead of addressing what I came to discuss, he became fixated on my racial identity and how I saw myself. Funny, he was Jewish, so you know what? I'm sure he wouldn't like people doing quite a few things and saying quite a few things to him. But anyways, that's besides the point. He made a shocking statement about race in South America. He then crossed his arms and angrily told me, "I know what I see in front of me, and you will tell me now that you are not mixed." He said that white people are not allowed in South America. He knows that for a fact. I remained calm, stood up and walked out, and I simply said goodbye. I'll not be seeing you again. I did eventually, I got a pathetic apology from the hospital saying that, he didn't really mean that. Yeah, okay. Anyways, now let's begin with the facts. My family knows our ancestry very well. My parents were both so angry about constant accusations that they took a DNA test for me. In my family, it is not unusual for full biological siblings to look as though they belong to different racial groups. This is how genetics work. Children do not inherit identical combinations of DNA from their parents, so you can have two full siblings that can share the same parents yet inherit different physical traits, including complexion, hair textures, and facial features. It's a random 50% of what you inherit from each of your parents. So once again, full siblings also do not share the same percentages. So along with telling my story, I'm going to teach some basic biology. I believe everyone should understand it because genetics may be complex to some, but in fact, there is just a basic principle, and it's really quite simple. Family resemblance does not always look the way strangers expect it to. Now, just to begin, my paternal grandfather is quite simple. He's Chinese. His birth certificate says Canton, China, and he immigrated to Guyana in 1911, where he did have a wife in China, and a long story with that. I won't get into that because he was basically also running for his life and looking for safety in Guyana. But anyways, he met my grandmother. From what we were always told, my grandmother is a mix of Chinese and Indian. So let's begin with the 23andMe. And once again, 23andMe doesn't ask you the ancestry of your family. They don't see pictures. They don't know anything. And, my parents and I, we sent them in all separately, so they do not know. So let's talk if 23andMe is just coincidence, because my family's background is quite unique. So if they're randomly bringing it up out of thin air, they pretty much banged it straight out. So my grandfather is Chinese. He comes from Canton, China. He immigrated to Guyana in 1911. Back then, it wasn't called Canton, which is where his birth certificate says he's born. It was called Guangdong area. Okay. Anyways, you inherit 50% from each parent, a random 50%. So you don't have your full genes of any parent. It's only 50% of each parent, and that's why full siblings do not share the same percentages, even twins. Okay, so like I said, it shows here that my dad is 62.6% East Asian. And there's also Chinese dye. Now, I should actually look into more further about what Chinese dye is. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Let's see. Going further on. There is Vietnamese, Indonesian, Thai, Khmer. I'm not pronouncing that right, I know. Myanmar, that's 0.8%. And then it says broadly Chinese, Southeast Asian. I'll look into that more further and break it down after. Now, my grandmother, he had actually a wife in China, but he left because of persecution, and he ended up in Guyana in 1911. My grandmother was a mix of Chinese and Indian, which we know. Now, 23andMe actually discovered that my grandmother did also have some African in her, because there is 9.7% African, right? And so we didn't need 23andMe to tell us basically our family history, right? This was done for me to basically give to that hospital to get that apology from them. So now let's take a look at my maternal grandparents, right? My maternal grandfather, he's Chinese. He was from Suriname. That's all I know about him. Okay. My grandmother, from my maternal side, I know we knew there was English in her. we just taught German because her grandfather came from Germany. That's all we know. That's where he came from, Germany. Now, here is my mom's DNA. Remember, people look at her and say I'm not her child because they look at her appearance and skin color. Actually, skin color, they look a lot. That's how people judge, is on your skin tone. Okay, so let's take a look. Her percentage, she's 48.1% sub-Saharan African. She is 38.3% East Asian, and same regions there. And she also has a little bit of indigenous American in her, which actually my mom already knew because she told me that even before this was taken. European, 12.3%. Now, looking at this, I am going to say that my grandfather, maternal grandfather, who also said he was also well, anyways, he is from Suriname, so, but it's the same region where my paternal grandfather came from. And once again, remember, I was always told that I'm adopted because I don't look like my mom, and everybody said, oh, your mom is just Filipino or Chinese. So think about that. Now, let's take a look at when people say 23andMe is a scam. First of all, I think it's a little bit weird then that it out of nowhere brings up, without seeing pictures of my family or knowing anything about us, because I didn't give them anything about us, it came up with accurate information, and it found matched us even with cousins that I know are my cousins, and cousins that my mom was actually able to talk to them and tell them how we connect, with even names of family members. So this says, calling 23andMe a scam is inaccurate. It is a real genetic testing service, but people often misunderstand what its results mean. 23andMe examines hundreds of thousands of genetic markers in your saliva. It can reliably determine whether two tested people share significant DNA, making close family member matches such as parents, children, and full siblings. Particularly strong evidence of biological relationship. It would be practically impossible for unrelated people to produce a genuine parent-child DNA match. So now I'm going to run through my breakdown. So it's a random 50%, like I said, from each of my parents. East Asian is 44.9%. You can see it's the same regions from my parents. I'll let that go through so you can see it. Sub-Saharan African, 33.5%. Once again, it's a random 50% from both of my parents. Central South Asian, 14%. And then European now, 6.9%. So if you even go back and compare, you'll see it's a random 50% from each of my parents that I'm getting from the regions. I also had an experience where this woman, and she was a BLM supporter. It was really weird. She came up, started a conversation with me, and sorry, to me, what she was saying was really weird because she was telling me that, oh, Canadian white people are racist, they're only nice to your face, but she knows that white people are racist, and she goes, American whites are better because they're racist right to your face. And we were at the lake, and while she was saying this, there was a lot of mixed couples walking past us, and I'm like thinking, well, this is odd. So when I told her I was mixed and I explained to her, she goes, I'm gonna tell you, your family hates you. And I'm like thinking, yeah, say that to my mom and she would then show you what racism is. Now, it's ridiculous because I have people who tell me, oh, well, you should just accept what people tell you who you are. Are you crazy? Do I tell them who they are? I wouldn't have the audacity to tell somebody who they are. Do I tell the person who's telling me that who they are? Do I tell you to give up your parents, your heritage? Now let's talk about my own kids, okay? When people tell me they're not my kids, do I say, oh yeah, your stereotypes trump the reality? It doesn't. You don't have the right to tell me also that I should give up my family's heritage or I should give up my kids because some people think that they're not my kids, right? Now, here's my son's DNA. As you can see, he has 51.1% European. And look, his Italian, it says Eastern Bari. It's exactly where his dad is from, and his dad's family's from Bari, Italy. Now, the British Irish, that's the bit he took from me. Those, and then the Greek and Balkan and Serbian, that's from his dad. And you can see the breakdown here. The, was it 25% East Asian, 15.8% African, and South Asian, 7.2%. So you can literally see how it's just a random 50% you're inheriting from each of your parents, not the full 100%, and how two full siblings can also look like different races. If more people understood basic biology as well as a little human history, they would realize that populations have been migrating, mating, and mixing throughout human history. The idea that people have always existed as completely separate and pure racial groups is simply not supported by genetics or history. All living humans belong to the same species, Homo sapiens. We shared the overwhelming majority of our DNA regardless of our complexion, hair texture, facial features, or where our recent ancestors lived. Our visible differences represent only a tiny portion of our genetic makeup. People have always traveled, traded, fought, migrated, formed relationships, and had children across communities. Borders, nationalities, and modern racial labels were created far more recently than the human connections found in our DNA. It is important to understand how, inheritance works. A child receives half of their DNA from each parent, but not an identical half. With every generation, DNA is reshuffled through a process called recombination. This is why siblings can inherit noticeably different combinations of ancestry and physical traits. As generations pass, the amount inherited from a particular ancestor generally becomes smaller. Eventually, you may inherit no detectable DNA from one specific distant ancestor, even though that person remains part of your, genealogical family tree. Therefore, an ancestry test may not display every person, culture, or population that is found in your documented family history. Our appearances can be different, but we are far more closely related than many people understand. Ultimately, we do not belong to separate biological races. We all belong to one family, and that's the human race.